missing persons alert. Authorities are currently looking for missing child Robbie Parker, male, brown hair, approximately 4 feet tall, last seen wearing a yellow shirt, brown shorts, and white tennis shoes. Suspect is described to be approximately 6 feet tall, barefoot, wearing a large bush or shrub on their person. Last seen at approximately 10:25 a.m. Please report any unusual activity to your local authorities.
Bloody hell. 12 grand for that house. What a deal. Having no friends, but loving RPGs, I grew up learning to appreciate just reading monster manuals. I'd get lost inside of Call of Cthulhu, Delta Green, and Pathfinder Monster Stats Daily. Seeing these scary, monstrous things catalogued and spread out to learn all I can about just brought out the innate file clerk locked inside my DNA that will never die down. And I know I'm not alone with this. The amazing popularity of the SCP universe, which at its core is a series of Wikipedia articles that make you shit yourself, along with the influence of analog horror and RPG monster manuals, in 2024 Night Signal Entertainment created Home Safety Hotline, a game that sought to combine all of these. At first I suspected this would end up like a lot of low budget horror games become and try to fake depth and intrigue by being overly vague and cryptic, but what I found instead was a soulful folkloric horror and even at times comedic adventure through a mundane office tech support job about the practicalities of living with goblins under your floorboards. Since this is a shorter narrative focused game, I'm going to talk about the graphics and audio and the first steps of the game before heading into spoilery territory, while focusing more on talking about specific parts that stand out rather than the whole thing. Set in 1996, the game maintains a solidly Windows 95 aesthetic. You never leave your computer screen and everything is run with very accurate contemporary effects, from the low refresh rate lag to the agonisingly slow way each page loads, with every colour so vivid it's all just mashing into the sort of light blue and beige that everything actually was in the late 90s and early 2000s. Audio is relegated to office music, with the calls so compressed they're into crunchy territory. The video and audio really do sell the setting though. The game plays out taking you through a single week as a new employee of the Home Safety Hotline, which is a sort of tech support crossed with plumbers crossed with exorcists. Your job is to field calls of people forwarded to the hotline and to identify the entity or event currently affecting them. Once the threat is identified, a sufficiently redacted information packet of what to do while revealing as little as possible will be provided to them. And before I get into our first day, I'll say the nature of this game means any gameplay can technically be a spoiler, but I will have a second spoiler checkpoint before I feel I am revealing too much plot-wise. The game is very narrative focused though, and not randomly generated. I'm only going to spoil a few supernatural creatures and the framework of the gameplay before that checkpoint. Clocking in on our first shift, we meet our supervisor Carol, who seems fairly nice and explains the job basics before letting us loose onto our first call. The UI is very Spartan. Call information is kept in one corner and your database of hazards takes up the rest of the screen. Initially we only have access to the most mundane of mundane hazards to identify, but as the game progresses we will unlock further information. Following some of our shifts, we will also unlock a new in-universe video, which is where the analog horror influences of the game come in. There are a total of 4 of these such videos: television commercial, broadcast August the 4th, 1995, science mysteries, and Thunder Peak, and they all feel fairly well made and add a lot to the feeling of the wider universe of the game outside of your little desk. As we work further days, our access opens up and our knowledge of the wider world and the creatures in it deepens. From day 2, we are introduced to the first supernatural creatures we deal with. Meet the Hob. Hobs are the most common supernatural creature, based heavily on the hobgoblin and bruni, and of course the Hob of English and Scottish folklore. They are the face of Home Safety Hotlines of supernatural hidden worlds, so much so the devs even sell a plushie of them.
I was just telling your friend here, the whole orchard's overrun with hobs.
The game's hobs come in a large variety of forms. There is the common, desk, fracture, pipe and toilet hob, but all their basic characteristics are the same. They are small, helpful little creatures who clean and eat rubbish and dirt, but cannot be removed once they nest. Luckily, they are totally harmless unless they aren't paid for their work in some way. Common hobs love the milk, while toilet hobs are mad for an egg. Not doing this leads to metamorphosis, something that is much beyond our pay grade at the minute to deal with.
Probably best not to think about that right now, but it's fucking horrible, yeah?
Folklore-wise, the hobs are rather close to their namesake in the bruni, while the hobgoblin tend to be more of a cunt about things. Being unable to remove them is mostly a new addition. Hobs, bruni and hobgoblins as stories can usually be made to go away by simply giving them clothes. In fact, in Surf It All, just cutting in here while doing the edit. So while scripting and recording, I thought it'd be fairly easy finding a known haul and photos of it, only for Sturf It All to have changed its name twice, and the only photos of it I could possibly find are from when it was listed for sale under its new name, Storthwaite All, in 2016. In said listing, there are only 2 real exterior photos, and nothing is high quality. One photo is taken from what seems like an actual mile away, and the other shows the house was previously inhabited by Swamp Thing. Don't forget the kitchen, that makes me feel like I'm about to contract whooping cough and die of old age at 40. All in Yorkshire, an helpful Hob was left a hat and cloak by the family, only for him to exclaim, "Ah, a cap and hood. Hob will never do more good." What an ungrateful bastard. Like, they can stay over, I just don't want them naked and dropping floppy goblin cock all over my stuff, thank you very much. Calls from people about Hobs are usually a challenge due to how similar they can be to more mundane household pests, and the last thing you want is the guy who has a raccoon in his kitchen to suddenly get the information packet that tells him there's a gnome in the shithouse and he needs to leave it eggs. For example, follow me through this call from very early into the game. While doing my favourite activity and reading about mould, I receive a call from Hunnigan.
Do you know if there's such a thing as house thieves that clean? Like, maybe to disguise the robbery? At night, I keep hearing all this noise coming from my living room, but when I go look at it, I find the place spotless, but haven't yet found anything missing. I've talked with the cops, but they keep telling me to call this number. So here I am. Is there something you can do?
The main point is the house is being cleaned and any other creature that breaks in is gonna leave a mess, eliminating any other suspects. Now we have no other specific location information or any hints to things being organised, so we'll have to make a decision that it can't be a subspecies like desk or pipe hob, meaning the correct answer here is common hob. Once you make your deduction, you simply select whatever you believe the hazard to be from a drop-down menu, but you are not told until the day is over if you got it correct or not, and you can even receive follow-up calls of the consequences of you screwing up on later days. With how much I was able to talk about just one creature type in the game, it won't surprise you to learn that I found all the entries very well thought out and researched, especially when it comes to the practical consequences of the supernatural. Like, yes, a portal to another dimension opening in your house is a problem, but have you considered how much of a draft that's going to create? Now, I'm going to talk about the lore in greater detail as well as the story. With such a curated narrative experience as this game, nothing can quite compare with experiencing it yourself, so skip to this time code if you care about spoilers for my conclusions on the main game and for the DLC discussion. As our knowledge of the supernatural side of the world deepens, we receive hints of the more powerful beings that are out there, and the hazards we are tasked with identifying increase in their threat and severity with people. The calls themselves also escalate in their difficulty as well. On top of all this, the IT department starts screwing up, and certain calls you'll find yourself locked out of the database and must determine the hazard purely from memory. A decent amount of the entries have a recorded sound file, and as dumb as it seems, this is usually totally useless except to spook yourself, or the occasional call when it is the only way you have of actually figuring out the hazard. For example, this is a call featuring one of the more dangerous creatures we encounter.
Please help me. The police refuse to do anything. They told me to call you. Please say you can help. My little boy, Jeremy, has gone missing. He's 8 years old and such a sweetheart. The last time I saw him was when I was tucking him into bed last night and checking his messy closet for bees to calm him down. Oh, it's silly, I know, but my poor Jeremy is always so concerned about bees and wasps and stuff. I miss him. I miss him so much. Oh, please say you can help me find him. He's all that I have.
So, the thing the game does very well is start to give you the jaded apathy an emergency number call handler must get, because while I'm sure her kid was lovely, screaming at me about it is not going to undigest him now, love. So clearly whatever it was targeted kids, which doesn't do much to narrow us down, because as it turns out, human children are the 20-piece McNugget box of the supernatural world. So from the call, the only other thing we have to go on is a mention of bees. Now, that does stand out, as most of the Child Chomp Brigade are the kind to be quiet about it and peace out afterwards, but then we find the false rose bush. The video at the start was the handiwork of this fella. It disguises as a rose bush and waits for days until children or pets come past for it to feed on. No mention of bees though, but playing the audio clip for the bush distinctly shows us that bees and other insects are not attracted to the flowers, so the false bush doesn't appear to be our candidate. Looking elsewhere, we find the false artifact. The false artifact takes the form of a human-made object and emits a low hum or buzzing sound to attract children and pets. When its prey comes close, it encases them inside and absorbs them over a period of several years. Unfortunately, while the objects are as easy to get rid of as picking them up and chucking them out the window, once a loved one has been encased inside, the Home Safety Hotline's only suggestion is the use of a memory erasing sprite to speed the grieving process. Getting answers wrong leading to the if the caller survived then returning to yell at you more the next day does aid in you caring less and less about the people calling. Especially when the third person is crying about how they messed up the instructions for a harmless orb, it's hard to still give a shit and you find yourself telling someone they stepped through a wooden frame in their cellar and now are in a different dimension where their children no longer exist without even blinking. And I do not even want to examine the weird thrill of power I get telling people their new lamp ate the kids. One complaint I do have is how some creatures say there's absolutely nothing that can be done about them, when I'm pretty sure this false flower pixie wouldn't be able to stand up much to a flamethrower. The last creature I'll talk about in detail is my favourite in the game, the Boggart. The result of a neglected orb metamorphosizing, they are 7 foot tall, false face wearing humanoids who watch you as you sleep and cause massive destruction to the houses they inhabit. Technically harmless, if unbothered, besides the damage they cause to the house. They react violently if spotted or even referred to, as much as saying the name of a Boggart will invoke its wrath, and cause it to pursue you. Even if you only say the name outside the location that you're at, the Boggart you are referring to will know you said its name and be coming for you. This unique mix of a mimetic horror and a big-ass scary dude living in your walls leads to them being some of the most cruel creatures, as due to their nature, receiving a call from someone dealing with a Boggart completely ties your hands, as there is no way to tell them what to do without causing the Boggart to attack them. So I imagine when you determine a Boggart infestation, nothing really gets done. Now what makes me really like Boggarts is being Northern English. I grew up with stories of Boggarts and Hobs, and outside of fable I've never seen these things actually represented in a game. So in Northern English and Scottish folklore, Boggart is more of a catch-all term for a negative spirit, and many places are named Boggart due to associations with them. Now as far as Obs turning into Boggarts, that is more ascribed to the Scottish Bruni rather than Hob, but is usually a result of mistreatment. The mimetic aspects of the Boggart and the bad things being associated with just saying the name are attributed in folklore to areas named Boggart or places where Boggarts are supposedly buried. A story of Boggarts comes from the village of Mumby in Lincolnshire. The Boggart is short, smelly and airy in the story, so there is a chance it was just someone from Birmingham. Now, apparently this Boggart was being a bit of an arsehole about things, so a local farmer strikes a deal with the Boggart to calm it down. He can have anything above or below the soil that the farmer grows, and the farmer will get the other half. The Boggart agrees, choosing what grows underground, and so our farmer, being a bit of a cheeky chappy, plants wheat, leaving the Boggart with nothing come harvest, and then even offers to swap with the Boggart so he can have everything above ground instead. Proving a lack of foresight uncharacteristic for a supernatural being in a story, the Boggart agrees, and surprising nobody, the farmer then plants carrots. Now, understandably fuming, the Boggart left the village forever. And that is what I genuinely love about this game. Its clinical, mundane approach to folklore and the supernatural almost compels you to learn more. This game got me reading a book from 1879 on archive.org for fun, and that is always a big plus. I'm now going to talk about the main arcing plot of the story, so if you would like to avoid spoilers, go to this timecode for the DLC discussion and my conclusions. So, as each day progresses, we find ourselves receiving pretty bizarre emails from a former employee who wronged our manager somehow. Through context clues like his obsession with finding holes to hide, and it's clear he was turned into a mouse, which is the sort of redundancy package you only get in the corporate world. The most powerful beings and the company themselves are shrouded in mystery, but we can learn what they call themselves by what they keep protected. You see, of all mundane creatures, bats are the most classified, and it's because their file states they are connected with the ones above the soil. As the week goes on, Carol starts losing her shit a bit and refers to management with the same term. Now, I'm not Columbo or anything, but it seems whoever is in charge may probably be or is connected to a vampire society, clearly using their occult knowledge for personal gain and profit as a removal service. Partway through the week, we're informed we'll have to stay on for the weekend. Meanwhile, each day Carol is absolutely tweaking out more and more, revealing she is clearly one of those above the soil, but she stays rather reasonable to us at least. The caseload does pile up though in severity and difficulty, with some rather devious and clever trick calls like mundane things such as termites right after a call that requires you to logically interpret what sound a deflating troll would make because IT services wipe the server again and you cannot access any sound file, so you better hope you listen to them beforehand. Our final 2 days have us assessed for a promotion and we were asked several riddle-like questions of the qualities of various hazards in the database. At first I completely misunderstood what was going on here and thought I had to select what creature I thought upper management was. Each of your bosses will call and say a few lines from the perspective of one of the creatures, and you must identify them like any other call. If you make it through that, Carol invites us to the promotion ceremony. We get a pretty fun credits with an original song as we are bestowed the greatest of all honours from those above the soil, the title of Junior Supervisor. This ends the main game and unlocks the sandbox score-based mode called Call Trainer, where you have endless text-based calls and a dwindling time frame to correctly answer each one. While this was heavily requested, I didn't get much out of it and enjoyed the curated experience of the main game much more. With game completion, we also unlock access to what is, for me, one of the highlights of the game, the making of art book. In this, not only do you have all the weird things behind the monster photos, including the dev's internal conflict about how well he hid the Spriggan in its photo, but in the twist of the century, this all relates to the now closed bizarre subject of a 3-hour Jenny Nicholson video. In a page that hit me like I owed it money, the devs of Home Safety Hotline are revealed to be former Evermore Park employees, specifically the faking who did the game after, well, you know, everything that happened at the park. Each page in this art book is dripping with info about the influences and the lore and the genuine love and attention played to the folklore that originated a lot of these creatures. And it's all this that makes the game stand so far above others. Like, it, in my opinion, is honestly just a brilliant read on its own, whether or not you play the game. Now, this game also has, of all things, a Christmas-themed DLC called Seasonal Worker. Seasonal Worker takes us through 4 shifts taking place December the 21st through to Christmas, with a whole bunch of new and more difficult seasonal hazards. We even play a new employee called Rebecca. Given our past promotion, I imagine we got a bit too la-di-da to be taking calls. Bloody hell, a Lake Mungo reference. There isn't really any major gameplay shakeups in the DLC, but you do have a couple of storylines that follow you through the days as you learn why Christmas is such a big deal for the Home Safety Hotline. We also get a whole bunch of new beasties with this DLC, including a lot more pop culture based monsters, including the Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present and Future and the fucking Polar Express. But the standout one of the lot for me is the Arfari Luid, a 19th century South Welsh variant of the ancient wassailing tradition of door-to-door Christmas time visits found throughout the island of Britain. The most common example of wassailing activity would be carol singing, but the Arfari Luid is notable for being fucking terrifying. A traditional obios is made with an actual horse skull hooded with a wedding veil or white sheet, and it's taken door to door by a group of men who approach doors and sing for the occupants. If the occupants sing back, the Arfari Luid would return another verse. This goes on until one side gives up, and the forfeit for stopping singing first when the Arfari Luid visits is offering food and drink for the obios and its party. Similar traditions can be found elsewhere like the Oudening in Kent and Old Ball of Northern England, but personally I have to give this to the Welsh for the common use of a wedding veil as the hood for the Arfari Luid brings a specific level of terror this fucking dopey thing could only dream of. In Home Safety Hotline, the Arfari Luid, despite being a horse demon creature this time, is pretty much identical to the tradition and is only an issue if you allow it inside or let the shrieking braying song it sings annoy you. Another thing that is stepped up from the base game is the difficulty, and before I bought the DLC I saw it being absolutely savaged in the reviews for arbitrary difficulty and some calls being impossible to work out. Now, I very much do know a thing or two about DLCs that spike the difficulty like it's an unattended drink, but this isn't it. I have no idea if it's just the right amount of warped brain chemistry that I have, but despite playing the DLC 100% blind, I never failed a single call, and the reviews complaining are quite literally a mystery to me. Now, to elaborate on this, I'm going to have to move into spoiler territory. If you wish to go completely blind, skip to this timestamp for my final conclusions. Now, to be fair, some of the DLC calls do rely on you catching your own assumptions and contextual clues rather than specific keyword information you match with the database. I think the best example is this call.
Someone stole our competition out from under us. I know it's those no-good Derricksons. They've always been jealous of us taking the annual Grand Gingerbread Master Award. Oh, rather than improve their own skills, they decided to break into our home last night and steal our post office. I found poor little postman Peter collapsing pieces on the floor, right next to a big hole with the burned remains of our post office inside. The police won't do anything. Can you come and perform a citizen's arrest?
So we're dealing with a missing post office and Postman Peter. One initial clue is that the post office is in a hole, which clearly implies this isn't a regularly sized post office, but doesn't tell us anything about what is going on here. She mentioned a Grand Gingerbread Master Award. Contextually, then we can assume the post office was part of a gingerbread village, possibly. Now, if Postman Peter is in pieces next to the remains of the post office, it stands to reason he could possibly have been a gingerbread man. But there are no hazards that are gingerbread men. Here we go to a hazard from the original game called the animation. Animation is a term for any humanoid object given life to complete a task, and it is specifically stated an animation will collapse once its task is done. Georgia is dealing with an animation that was cast upon her to sabotage a gingerbread competition. And as my nan taught me, that is why you never bake with wizards. Outside of the standard calls, we are introduced to a side story about the escape of a hyper-intelligent mouse king whose existence was referenced in one of the videos in the base game. And we are also introduced to the most powerful and dangerous entity the Home Safety Hotline deals with, the Twilight, tracked by a Home Safety Hotline observatory. The Twilight is our ticking clock element for the DLC, a spaceborne living mass of colour similar to the Aurora Borealis. Every year it arrives on Earth on December the 25th. The Twilight feeds on despair, and if it sends us enough down on Earth, it will descend and drain the life out of all things above and below the soil. The only way to prevent this is to, and I'm not fucking kidding, spread Christmas cheer. Yes, the compulsory fun of the holiday season is actually a secret conspiracy by Home Safety Hotline to protect the Earth from a sadness-based apocalypse. Failing calls reduces the Christmas cheer meter, threatening the Earth from the Twilight, and you increasingly get calls from people whom the Twilight is seeding sadness into. But if you manage to survive through to Christmas Day, it's time for the Home Safety Hotline Christmas party. Home Safety Hotline went from my expectation of a derivative YouTube lore video bait style game to something that inspired me to learn more about my own cultural folklore, which, especially when the most popular depiction of a lot of those things is only found in the pages of transphobic wizard books, was something really refreshing and fun to see. It manages to bring scares and laughs without ever going too far either way, and the puzzle answers never came close to being adventure game style moon logic. There are a lot of paths the devs could have gone down while making this game, and I'm glad that they chose consistently the much harder but much better ones each time. Although I will question why the devs think it's such a fucking laughing matter that a Hob got so pissed it blacked out drunk at their Christmas party. Wow, I made it to 4 videos. I'm starting to get the hang of things, I feel now. This was originally part of a multi-game video, like my very first one, but this ended up getting so big it spiraled out into becoming its own thing. My next video should be that multi-part one, although now I need to find a third game to fill in the hole that this one left. It's all going to be about horror games based around doing a low-paying or sort of menial job, which I found is a quite interesting subgenre that hasn't really been explored. Interesting little trivia fact, every single video I have done so far originally was a completely different game that I then stopped recording for and then switched games like 2 weeks after. Now, hopefully, this time, the next video will be that multi-game one and it won't be if it's something completely different, you know what happened. If you have any questions about this video, make sure to leave a comment as well. I will read all comments. I mean, that's pretty easy considering I get like 7 a video, but still. And until my next video, I've been Daniel Wadsworth, and thank you for watching.